Hey, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can write massively big numbers, so really big numbers, using scientific notation and what scientific notation is. All right, here's a big number, 32 million. Now, it's big. I mean, there's a lot bigger, but it's still a pretty big number. Still got like 8 digits to write there, but we can write that in scientific notation, and it looks like this, 3.2 times 10 to the 7. So let's pull that apart and have a look and see what we've done to get from what we call an ordinary numeral, which is just when it's written in sort of normal numbers, to this scientific notation format. And there's a couple of things you'll notice when we talk about scientific notation. You'll see that there's one number before the decimal. So if you have, there's two pieces. There's this bit at the front, which is the decimal bit. Okay, it can only be one number, then the decimal. If there's more than one number in front of the decimal, then there's something wrong and we need to fix it. There's also then a times or a multiplication sign, and then 10 to the power of something. So they are the pieces that make up our scientific notation. A decimal here, times, and then 10 to the power of some number. And this some number we're going to look at right now to decide what that is. So here's our first example. Write 732,000 in scientific notation. Here's that number written out as an ordinary numeral. Now, every single integer or whole number has a decimal place or a decimal point. It's just hidden. It's here. It's right at the end. Okay, so it's this point here. So I could write 732,000, put a decimal point at the end and put a 0, because it's the same thing, isn't it? 0.0. But the reason I've done that is that I want to take this decimal and I want to move it up to, remember we said there is one number, then the decimal. So I'm going to move it from here and I'm going to place it up here. So when I do that, how many places do I have to move it? Well, I move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. And now it sits up here between the 7 and the 3. I've taken this decimal and I've moved it up, so it's after the first number. We're nearly there. We've got the decimal part. Remember I said there's a decimal part at the front here? We now write times 10 to the power of. Now, the power is simply how many places we moved it. We moved it 5 places. So 732,000 written in scientific notation looks like that. 7.32 times 10 to the 5. What about the number 500 written in scientific notation? Well, let's take the exact same approach. There's a decimal point at the end of the 500 sitting in here. I want to move it so that it sits up after the first number. So it's going to come to this point. How many places do I move it? I have to move it 2 places. So my number is now 5.0 because I moved it up here after the 5 times 10 to the 2 because I moved it 2 places. Now the only twist on this one is that we don't have to write 5.0. That's the same thing as 5. Like 0.0, there's no other decimals. So I could write that as 5 times 10 to the 2. Last example, what about if I undo it? What about if you were given a number in scientific notation and you're asked to write it as an ordinary numeral? We're going to write out the decimal part, the 6.32, and we're going to add some zeros at the end. Now we can add as many as we want after the last number if it's after the decimal. So 6.32, I could add a whole heap of what we call trailing zeros. My index here is 5, like it's 10 to the power of 5. That means it was moved 5 places to get it there. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to move it 5 places along, okay? Because remember, this is a big number. We're talking about numbers more than 1 here. So if it was here, it must have been moved from 5 places this way. So when I move that along, my decimal, it is now, it's gone from here down to here. And the last little step is I don't need these zeros after the decimal point, so just chop them off. That is 6.32 times 10 to the 5 written as an ordinary numeral. That's how we write big numbers, or any number that is more than 1 gets written using this form. Now we're going to look in another video about how we can write scientific notation for really small numbers that are less than 1. Good job, well done.